Dunima down under is a Dunima is somebody who comes from southwest Scotland. So there's a bit of trivia for you in a pub quiz sometime. So I started off in IT. Then I realised that working for an IT company in agriculture was pretty damn boring. And I got into the grains industry, and then I realised it's probably just as boring, really. I'm responsible for deciles when it comes to markets, is that they are still just a representation of where you currently are. It doesn't tell you where the market is going. You can look at it and say we're at the 100th decile, or 100th percentile, but it doesn't mean the market is not going to continue going higher. It just shows that it hasn't been higher during the period you're looking at. So we saw that quite well in wool in the last couple of years. It was sitting at the 100th percentile, and then next week it was higher and higher and higher and higher for months. So use them along with your own gut feeling about where the market is going. The forward curve is by far, in my view at least, the most important tool to look at when looking at grain markets, especially so for producers of grains. So the forward curve, this is a hypothetical one I put together. When we look at grain prices, let's say we're looking at Chicago, there'll be a contract for many different months going out into the future. So when we look at the forward curve, in this example, we're looking, for argument's sake, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 9 months into the future. But in reality, it's looking out, in a real forward curve, we'll be looking out 3 years probably, 2.5 to 3 years. And the market is either in contango or it's in backwardation. The wheat markets tend to be in contango, and this is where the forward markets are giving you a premium compared to the current market. So that means if you were to sell grain for 2 years' time, you're generally going to get a premium versus selling at spot. So they're basically paying a carry cost, which would be the physical term. The wool market, forward market, tends to be in backwardation, where you've got the price forward is actually lower than the current price. What it tends to look at when a market is in contango is basically telling you that the market is not necessarily needing it just now, whereas when it's in backwardation, when the forward months are at a discount, it's telling you that the market wants that just now. So they're willing to pay a discount for the future. 2 minutes. Right, well, this is just a quick example of this year. This is the forward curve in June, and this is the forward curve now. So if you were a grower and you sold in June versus now, you would have a $42 worse price selling now versus June on futures. Conversely, if you're buying, it's quite the opposite. And the reason why we look at this period quite often is that we look at seasonality. And in these two charts, we can see that there tends to be a seasonal spike in May through July. And that's because that's when the Northern Hemisphere is producing most of its crop. And if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, or left-hand side, sorry, this is where the market is at its most volatile. And volatility is actually not always a bad thing for producers if it provides you the opportunity to get a better price. So during that period of time, the market tends to be volatile, tends to rise, or at least it has over the last 5 years, and then dropped quickly after that. We talk about Chicago, but the reality is that Chicago is not the only place you can hedge. You can hedge in Australian futures, or you can hedge in Matif, which is France. We did some analysis. It turns out the highest correlation for Australian prices is actually Paris. I won't go through all this because I'm running out of time, but we can see here that Parisian futures actually correlates higher with Australian prices than Australian futures, which doesn't really make much sense. And it correlates higher than Chicago. But the reason why I think that happens happens is that Russian trading companies use powers to hedge their wheat, and the Russian market is an export market, and Australia is an export market. I'll quickly go through this. Basically, this is just looking at the fact that you can hedge other things apart from just your pricing. You can actually hedge Singapore petrol, which correlates with our petrol price, and our petrol price correlates with our diesel price. So we can use futures as a way of reducing our fuel pricing. The same with fertilizer. There are fertilizer swaps, so you can reduce your risk for paying for fertilizer. So just a couple of scenarios. I should be able to do this in a couple of minutes. So you're needing to buy grain because you've got to feed, but we don't know what the season's going to like. You can go out and buy physical grain and then hold it on farm. Or if you're producing grain, you can hold it on farm yourself. The good thing about this is it guarantees you access when you need it. It also provides the fact that if the market rises rapidly, you won't have to pay to bring in the grain. So effectively you get an advantage if the market rises. However, you lose an opportunity because you're tying up a lot of capital in grain which is just sitting there. And if the price falls, you effectively lose out because you could have capitalized on a higher price. So there's a bit of risk there. And the main question is, well, how long do you hold? There was people last year who held on for 10, 20 years on the grain. Well, if you actually just sold that grain and put it into a savings account, you probably would have done better. You can buy a futures contract for a forward period of time. So for instance, you can buy a futures contract for 2 years' time. You gain exposure to a rising market. So if the market rises, you start to effectively have money in your pocket. So when you go to buy physical grain, you can offset the higher price of your physical grain. The capital outlay is lower. There will still be some capital outlay, but it's lower than going out there and buying 1,000 tonnes a week. You can use a bank swap, which is effectively a futures instrument, but through a bank. They are more expensive. So a straight futures contract will be about $1 a tonne, a bank swap is about $10 a tonne, but you don't have to pay anything up front, so it's got some advantages. Options are popular overseas, especially in UK and the US. They're not quite as popular here, but I think over time they have some sort of very good positives for buyers and sellers. So if you haven't yet made your physical purchase, you can buy a call option, and you pay a premium. If the market rises, by buying a call, you're effectively saying, I want to buy at this level. If the market rises, you get money back into your account. So then when you go to buy grain from Jimmy down the road, the profit you make in your call option, you use that to offset against paying more for your grain. If the market falls, you lose your premium, which for argument's sake, let's say it's $10 a tonne, but your physical price will be lower. So you're sort of balancing the physical versus the paper. If you have made your physical purchase, you can do the opposite. So you bought your grain at $300 a tonne, but you still want some exposure to the market, because what if the market falls? You can buy a put option, which allows you exposure to a falling market. So if the market falls, you will exercise your option, you will get some money in your bank, and then you can assign it against your grain purchases. So then it's a way of maintaining exposure to the market, but without having a huge outlay. Because there's a few croppers in here, let's put in a bit of an example. Quite a popular one in recent years has been farmers who want to sell at harvest, but still want some exposure, and it depends on how the market is structured. The option one is, again, you hold your grain in storage until the price rises, no cash flow, cost a monthly storage fee, and opportunity loss. A popular way to do it for growers who are trying to sell grain is a cash and call. So you sell your physical grain, you buy a call option, it provides you with exposure to the market for a known cost. So if the market rallies, you then gain effectively income, but you haven't paid a huge outlay and you haven't got as much risk on your books. And the good thing about that is it's a known worst case scenario. So the only thing you can lose is the premium you paid, a bit like an insurance. I got this example here as well, just is something that one of our clients did. They were what I would consider risk tolerant, stroke a speculator. So this was back in, actually this time last week, back in September. They looked at the market price not for the following harvest, but 2 harvests away and 3 harvests away, and they said, we're at drought levels, but we don't know if it's going to be a drought the following year and the following year. It's looking like that this year is looking pretty tough, but what they did was they effectively sold wheat for 2 years ahead at $370 a tonne, but then they had to buy back the position to close off their contract. They did it around about 390. But what it meant was that they effectively had a profit of $150,000. But because these were a consumer, if they had a risk policy manual within that business, this particular person would have been sacked. Because what they'd actually really done is their exposure to the market, for argument's sake, was 2,000 tonnes of physical that they needed to feed their pigs, for argument's sake. But they've actually sold another 2,000. So their exposure has actually doubled up to 4,000. Yes, they made money, but if the market had gone the other way, they would have been losing on 4,000 tonnes rather than 2,000. So it's important to understand what the particular risks are and also understand the difference between managing risk and speculation. In this case, he could argue himself that it was risk management, but I think he was just trying to tell himself that. But in conclusion, really, it's really a case of there's sort of no one-size-fits-all to price risk management. It changes on a season-by-season based on what the market structure is, and there are multiple ways of managing risk on price. So, I'll give you a plug. We've got a podcast, so if you want market updates and hear our team's dulcet tones, then you can jump on that.